Hello, this is another screencast from 2Tim316. My name's David Emanuel. We're going to be carrying on with our Hebrew letters, and today we're going to look at the letters from Lamed through to Pei. Begin with the Lamed, which is this one here. This is one of the few letters that actually goes above a line. So you're going to see this letter, which is going to be taller than the other letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And we're going to draw it just like this. We're going to go down a straight line. I prefer to use block letters, and we go straight down like that. Beginning above the line, we work down, we move across, and we go down. Now, as you're going to see, this varies in with fonts. So sometimes you're going to have a little bit of a crown here, and sometimes you're going to have a bit of a bent line here. The basic shape is still the same, though. When you draw it, sometimes I do this. This sometimes confuses my students in class. Use a bit of a bend there, maybe, or sometimes it even bends the other way around like that, and you'll frequently see it written like that. It's the Lamed. The Lamed is represented, the transliteration symbol is simply the letter L, and this is an L as opposed to an I going like that, straight down. So if we were to use, see a few of these transliteration symbols together, let's just say we'd have a Lamed. We've looked at the Aleph already, so the Aleph goes high up here. And we've looked at the Bet and there. So you have Lamed, Aleph, and Bet. Like that. That's what it would look like. And the Lamed would be this letter here. That's the Lamed. We now going to move on to the Mem. No final forms with the Lamed, but there is with the Mem. Two different forms, very similar, quite similar, but nevertheless different. Now the Mem, there are two ways of drawing it. You can either draw it as like a semicircle, almost a semicircle like that, with a straight line and just a little bit of a crown, not a crown, but a cap just at the edge there, mimicking this here. The Mem, when you draw it though, be aware, be careful that you need to draw it just inside here. If I draw an arrow up here, just inside there's a little bit of a gap, which you've got to have really as well, facing the direction in which you write, bearing in mind that it's a reminder that Hebrew goes this way when we write it. We write the letters, but the transliteration symbols being different, they go that way. Just a reminder, keep that in mind. Another way of drawing the Mem is going to be as a triangle, and many students find it easier to do it as a triangle, still leaving that gap there and still with a little cap on it there. Either way is acceptable. This is the Mem as it would appear at the beginning or in the middle of a word. Either way, one of these two methods is acceptable. And at the end, the final form is like this. Very, very similar. Very, very similar. This time it's just going to be like a square with a little cap. That I think is the best way of doing it. Bear in mind this is a square. A couple of things you need to know. It's a square, more of a square, and there's a little cap here. And that needs to be remembered because there's going to be another similar letter we'll look at in just a second called the Samech. The Mem is simply represented by the letter M in its transliterated form. So you'd have an M, you'd have the Lamed, which is the L there, and just for the sake of the example, we're going to have an Aleph, just like that. Doesn't take the weak dagesh, it's not one of those letters, but it does have a final form, and that's the Mem. Let's just write the name down here for you, Mem, just like that. Next is the Nun. Nun. This is another one. This is similar to the Kaf in many ways, but the big difference is that the lines above and below, these extensions here, are not as large. So with the Nun, you really want to just, with block letters, you really just want to do a small little short extension lines just there for the Nun. It's quite similar to the Vav, except that down here there's a little foot. If you remember, the Vav looks like this, but the Nun, when we draw that, is going to look like that with a little foot, with this part here, that bottom extension, whereas the Vav does not have that. These are letters which are frequently confused. The Nun does have a final form. Let me just do a normal regular form here for you, show you how to draw that. The Nun does have a final form. It looks like this. Now, it's another tricky one because the thing with the final form is, this is another one that can be confused with the Vav, but the nun it goes below the line right here. The vav, if I were to draw a vav just here, let's change color, let's go green. I want to draw a vav just here, and the vav is going to stop there. Go back to my blue. The vav is going to stop there at the line, but the nun is going to go below the line. And the nun sofit you're only going to find at the end of a word. Not the end of a line, but the end of a word, any word. The final form looks like this. Both forms, just like the other final forms, they're going to be represented by n. So it doesn't matter that this is if it's at the end, if it looks like this in Hebrew, when we transliterate it, and we'll see some exercises later on in a later screencast, when you transliterate it, it's going to look like an N, just as this one will too. And we're going to draw it just by, again, it's going to be like the regular nun, but instead of stopping down here and making the extension, you're just going to go right down below the line. That's what it's going to look like there. So that's the nun, the letter N. I'm just going to write these basically like this. When we get to transliterations and letters, we'll go through a more detailed description of how to transliterate some of the vowels. Next is the samech, and this is the one I said that looks a bit like the mem. But the samech essentially is a circle, even though this font doesn't necessarily represent it as such. But when it comes to you drawing it, you basically just want to draw a circle with a small cap on the end, just like that. Small circle with a cap. That's the samech. And it's the same at the beginning and the end of a word. There's no special final form on the samech. And the samech is basically represented with the letter S. Samech. Just like that. Quite simple, straightforward one-to-one. That's not a great way of drawing it, but it could be drawn that way. That's the samech. Next is the letter ayin, and this causes problems because it is very similar to the letter Y in English, and many times students see this and automatically want to translate it as a Y. Note the font differences. Here you've got these little kind of crowns which you don't necessarily have to duplicate when you're writing it out. I found the best way to draw this out is really to draw a backward L, and then from down here just move up like that. Probably the best way to do it. Do a couple more of those, and it's ayin. This is the letter ayin. Now, this is similar to the aleph in that there isn't an equivalent of the ayin in the English language, and so we have to come up with a symbol to represent it. Just look at this. Don't worry too much. This doesn't always go below the line, but it may do just a little bit. Mine haven't done, and that's quite okay. That's quite all right. And if yours don't, when you practice writing these out, then that's okay too. So the ayin, like the aleph, has a symbol. Now the symbol for the ayin is like this, and it's like a cup pointing to the right hand side. Now I need to make a distinction between that and the aleph, which is also a cup, but with the aleph the cup points to the left. So it's a small difference, but nevertheless one you should really take note of. So the ayin is like that, goes up here. So I'd say the ayin, and let's just put a bet in there to see what it looks like, and a lamed there as well. So that's the ayin, and the ayin, it's for all intents and purposes it will sound the same as the aleph. Most of the time it will be swallowed up by the vowel, whatever vowel comes underneath it, but the ayin does have a different sound depending on where you are from, and certain Sephardic traditions will pronounce a deeper ayin sound, so you'd have abel, avad, like that. This is the aleph, by the way, just aleph. Make that perfectly clear. So it does kind of have a sound. It can have a sound in certain spoken traditions, but for the purposes of our classes, we will pronounce it the same. We will treat it very similar to that of the aleph. And the last one for today is another one of these with a triple form, is the pei. The pei, which is like the P transliterated, gets that in a moment. With a dot, I'm going to draw it with a dot. We're going to kind of draw a square spiral. That I think is the best way of doing the pay with a dot inside. Just do another one of those, like a square spiral. With a dot inside. It can appear without the dot, without the dagesh. That's what we called it, the dagesh. And when it appears without the dagesh, it makes a different sound. So with the dagesh, it's going to make a hard P sound. Without the dagesh, if we just do the form here, then it's going to make a more like an F sound or a PH sound, let's say. A F, a F. And we draw it still using the P, but this time, like the other dagesh, weak dagesh letters, we put a line underneath it. And again, that line kind of represents the removal of the dagesh there. So let me just draw the lines, just draw lines of equivalence. The pay is going to be, with the dagesh, is going to be like a P. The F sound is going to be drawn like this. And it too has a final form, which we would need to construct really just by doing that, beginning that square spiral, but then just coming down to the bottom without stopping, if you like, past the line at the bottom there. And that's the big difference, this space here. But this one too, without a dagesh, usually at the end of a word it doesn't have a dagesh, and it's going to be represented by this letter here. So you're going to say a pay or a fey, and you could have also an ayin, and you could have a bet, something like that. It would look like that on the line. So those are our letters that we're looking at today. Basically, we went from Lamed to Pei, and in the last screencast, we'll cover the remaining letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Thank you for joining us. Do practice writing, and I'll see you in the next screencast.